What's the most money you've ever wasted on a dream, on a fleeting chance? People make fun of simps for like tossing all their money at e-girls or whatever, like cute Twitch booby streamers, and then they get made fun of like, you donated $100, whatever. But okay, listen, I submit to you the possibility that there is actually something infinitely more worthy of ridicule, a waste of money on a fleeting dream so scant that it's amazing they actually felt it worth their time and money to begin with. President Trump paid $3 million in Wisconsin recount only for Biden to gain 132 votes. And yes, I am using the New York Post. We are diversifying our media consumption here. The one good New York Post article, delicious people, my God. These expensive new votes, all from Milwaukee County, now add to Biden's lead of nearly 20,600 votes in the state. Whoo, boy. Now, this is part of a broader effort on the part of the Trump administration to delegitimize the results of the election. And the president-elect of the United States, Joe Biden's tremendous victory, which is hysterical. But man, oh man, you know what they say? Baby, Trump, if you keep recounting, we just add more Biden votes. You fail to account. The secret Chinese, Venezuelan ballot manufacturers, they're still in operation, baby. Their plants are still there. They're still waiting at all the posts. Every time you do a recount, they slip a couple hundred more votes to Biden. In all seriousness, this delusion that recounts were ever going to be a legitimate avenue for the Trump administration to get back on their feet was always just that, a delusion. Recounts generally vary by a couple hundred. That's usually like the margin they're willing to swing, because mistakes in counting just aren't all that common. Now, I've already seen conservatives, and they're saying, well, the recount's illegitimate too because they counted all the fake ballots. And if that's the case, you're not asking for a recount. You're asking for all the votes to be thrown out, which thankfully those attempts keep getting thrown out of court. So good luck with your ongoing efforts to do that then. Recounts generally swing by a couple hundred. That's why, for example, in Florida, back in 2000 with Bush v. Gore, the recount in Florida was such like a pivotal issue because I think it was 537 votes difference between Bush and Gore, which is absolutely undeniably within a recount margin. A couple hundred. Are you fucking kidding me? Imagine the fate of the country and two Bush presidencies being decided by a couple hundred votes. And of course, there was other smelly, nasty shit going on there too. Like, the brother of the presidential candidate, sort of the governor of Florida, and the ballot changes made a lot of people think they were voting for one candidate when they were voting for another, and the butterfly ballots and blah, blah. So that was one of the very rare instances where a recount was, I think, a legitimate, avenue for overturning an election result. And I think that the Supreme Court's decision to shut down that recount is undeniably one of the most severe constitutional crises this country has ever faced, frankly, because it indicated that you can kind of cheat an election, and then if the Supreme Court don't like you, they can just force you to stop the recount. The Trump administration complains that they're not being given a fair shot in court, but they're being heard out. They've been heard out dozens of times. They keep filing these lawsuits, sometimes very expensive legal claims on their part, and it keeps leading to the same non-result. It keeps leading to nothing, and that's, of course, because there is nothing. That's, of course, because the Trump administration's bid for maintaining power has been conspiracism. And I have to wonder where they're going to go from here. As I speak right now, we're still, what are we? We're still like 7 weeks? A month? Yeah, like 7 weeks away from the inauguration of Joe Biden, which means we have not heard the end of Trump's attempts to, win. There are probably going to be more. I know that just recently, by the way, the Kraken was released, and I think, wasn't it like they misspelled a word twice just on the front page? Hold on. The Kraken misspelling. It was something stupid like that. Yeah, Sidney Powell's Kraken voter fraud lawsuits ridiculed by legal experts over typos, lack of evidence. Ah, but those lawyers are just part of the deep state too, and so are all of the judges that are hearing these cases that were appointed by Trump himself. And yeah, the whole the whole goddamn thing. What were the typos for these? Including spelling district incorrectly twice in the Georgia suit's opening line. Yes, the Eastern District of Michigan misspells the name of William Briggs. My God. The Michigan document contains a number of pages where the entire sentences don't have any spaces between the words. Who wrote this? Were they high on something? Was this done in some sort of opiate induced fever state? Were they in a fugue state? Did they fucking delegate the typing of this legal document to a team of monkeys? Bradley P. Moss, a prominent lawyer who covers national security, said, "Rarely does a lawyer need to make their lawsuit 100 pages long. Maybe if you're literally taking down a multinational corporation with 25 separate counts." I mean, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? It's all about throwing so much at you that you can't parse the bullshit. That's been the whole Trump administration, in fact. That's the entire fucking modus operandi. If he does so much bad shit, my job is to cover political stuff. I couldn't even begin to tell you all the bad stuff that Trump has done. You can find, if you go online and you look up like all the things Trump has done, you can find lists of hundreds of things, from petty crimes to open and blatant corruption to horrible, horrible laws passed, the terrible things that he said. But I don't remember even a tenth of them. And part of that's because I have a bad memory, and I own up to that. But a lot of that is also because that is a deliberate strategy for avoiding criticism. We talk about Nixon a lot. What does everyone remember? Everyone remembers, Watergate. And in my personal opinion, Watergate doesn't hold a candle to a lot of the shit the Trump administration's done, but that's what everyone remembers about Nixon. It's Watergate. But with Trump, what are you going to remember after all this? What, are you going to remember the Charlottesville comments? Are you going to remember Stand Back, Stand By? Are you going to remember the wall? Are you going to remember the impeachment? Are you going like, what's going to stick with you? And that's also what they're doing with this voter fraud scandal. They're throwing so much at you that it's impossible to parse the bullshit. They've been doing this since the election began. They've been doing this since before the election began. Trump was delegitimizing the safety of mail-in ballots erroneously, for months beforehand. The election actually rolls around, and the nanosecond the mail-in ballots start getting counted for Biden, they freak out. There's a million things all of a sudden. Look at that county right there. That county says there were more voters than there are actual people who live in that county. Look at that county over there. That person signed an affidavit saying that they weren't allowed to view the voting process, except they aren't a vote watcher, so they weren't even supposed to be there. And look at that county, and that county says there were a sudden spike of votes, and that county right there said there were votes that arrived at 3 a.m. And then, like, you can debunk them bit by bit by bit, but it doesn't matter. Like, do you think they care? Any of you, have you had an argument with a Trump supporter online and they've given you some argument for why it's fraud and you've argued against it and they've changed their mind? No. Conspiracism doesn't work that way. That's why conspiracism in general should be avoided. I take issue with any leftist, by the way, who says, like, well, conspiracies are just when you question the system. No, that's not what conspiracies are, okay? The traditional meaning of a conspiracy is just people conspiring to do a thing. And if by conspiracy you mean, like, I'm interested in, like, corporate conspiracies to fix prices or to destroy the opposition or whatever, fine. But conspiratorial thinking is incredibly dangerous, because once you're down that road, your ability to process information, your ability to determine what is and is not correct, is broken. And once you've destroyed a person's faculties of reason, there's really not that much you can do with them. It's like a broken machine. You can polish it up as much as you like, but if the internal mechanisms, it's like frying a motherboard in a computer. If the internal mechanisms aren't right, there's not much you can do there. I mean, say, for example, like your graphics card is broken, and your monitor's not displaying shit. You can paint a wallpaper on your monitor with paints. You can get acrylic or oil, and you can create a simulacrum. Can't pronounce shit today. You can paint a fake. You can make things look the way you like, and you can maybe sometimes get a conspiracy-minded person to agree with the conclusion of yours, but the underlying mechanisms are what's important. That's why I don't bother arguing with conspiracy theories. I mean, sometimes for fun. I argued with that one guy who was a climate change denier, and that was fun, but I spent most of the time just making fun of him. Because at a certain point, again, you can't... Here's my standard, okay? Maybe this can be like a social experiment, okay? What you need to do when you're arguing with these conspiracy types is the trick they do, and the trick the Trump administration does, is they get away with saying bullshit, and when they're called in it, they just move to the next point. Here's the secret, okay? If you're going to argue with one of these types, you have to open up with something. Maybe it's, you can look at them, or type at them, I don't know, and you can say something like, look, I've argued with your types before. I'll do it, but if you say a single thing that is factually incorrect, easily debunked, or completely unsubstantiated, I'm walking away from this. A single thing. Can you do that? Can you participate in this conversation without engaging in any empirical disinformation? And sometimes they'll argue the premise, what do you consider truthful? But sometimes they'll say yes. And of course, invariably, they'll trip over this. I've done this before in arguments. I did this in college sometimes, It's very frustrating with people when you argue with them and they say something wrong and you prove it wrong. They just move to the next point. But that's arguing with conspiracy types. But hey, at least they don't spend $3 million per argument. Oh wait, that's the right link. At least they don't spend $3 million per argument, huh? It's rough out there being a Trump supporter. I would feel bad for them if they weren't. Oh, a donation while I'm offline. Love your streams. Come back soon, Vosh. Peppo hug from Harbor with the tier 2 sub. Thank you, Harbor. I appreciate that. Now you've been immortalized in a video. You don't even know it. You won't even know it until the video releases. That's really cute, All right. Peace.